I just wanted to say thanks for everybody for coming. We have 64 people, which is really exciting. I've done these a few times before, and we've had many fewer people than that. So it's really cool to see that many people be interested in working at ad hoc and the application process and all that. I hope that you can see my screen. I have a slide deck that I'm going to go through to talk about our recruiting process. Let me switch over to that. So let me just introduce myself a little bit. I've been at ad hoc for about a year and a half now. I am the tech lead on QPP, which is one of our projects with CMS, which is the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. QPP is the Quality Payments Program. There are a lot of acronyms, as you might expect when working with the government. But what that project is a way to incentivize Medicare providers to improve their services and equipment and tools by Medicare paying them more if they can provide proof that they are doing these things. So if you may hear things like politicians say that we want to encourage doctors to use electronic health records. Well, this is how they do that. They pay them more if they use electronic health records. And Medicare is such a big part of the system that paying people more to do certain things can really steer healthcare as a whole in this country. So it's exciting work that we're doing. We just launched it, version 1, at the beginning of January, and it's going really well. I've also done a lot of work in support of our engineering application process, and that's the thing that we're here to talk about for the most part. So that's why I'm leading the discussion today. And I guess let me just jump into that. So as a summary, I'm going to talk a little bit about ad hoc, who we are as a company, how we do our work, our culture, specifically around remote stuff, because we are a remote first company, which may be new to a lot of folks. How the recruiting process works. The primary way that it works is with homework, which is some exercises that we ask folks to do. So I'll talk about the how and why of that, and then the next steps after that process. So just a little bit about me. It was founded in 2013 by Greg Gershman and Paul Smith. This is so we're around 100 people. This is a little bit out of date. I think we're closer to 120 people now. We are the prime contractor on 3 contracts. For anybody unfamiliar with government work, the prime means we are the contract holder. There's also work around government contracting where you are the subcontractor, probably a term that people are familiar with. Under those circumstances, another company owns the contract and you sort of work for them. We're remote first from day one, and down here there's a map of where we are in the country. This is actually outdated by a few months. I think we've added a few more states since I put this up there. But yeah, so the requirement is that you live and work in the United States and have the permission to do so. Okay, so like sort of how we got here. So you may remember that back in 2013, when they launched healthcare.gov as part of the Affordable Care Act, it was a bit of a disaster technologically, and that threatened to be a major political disaster for President Obama at the time. The solution was to bring in a small team of people from outside government to try to help fix all the problems. And so Greg and Paul were both part of that team. This is Paul right here. And so that's sort of how the company was founded out of that project. There's a talk here where Paul discusses it. I thought that was really inspiring before I started to see that talk. So it's a fun thing to watch. And you can also read about the effort on our blog over here. We'll send out the presentation after this, so you'll have access to these links later on. Okay, so since that time, kind of as part of the response to that effort, I think people inside government saw that we needed to change the way we do IT contracting. If you are like me, then and coming from outside of the government contracting world, you may not have a favorable opinion of how government IT contracts work. I certainly had my predispositions before I started talking with folks at ad hoc. But the good news is that things are getting a lot better and that we can do really good work under government contracts, and that's kind of why we're here. So as part of the rescue, or after the rescue, there was organizations like the United States Digital Service and 18F that were created to improve the way that IT contracts are awarded and delivered. The USDS in particular kind of goes out into the various agencies and teaches them how to use modern tools, techniques, and those kinds of things in the contracts that they want to produce. So we apply for contracts where we will have the freedom to use modern tech and processes. And an exciting thing about working here is we get to build software that really matters. I mentioned the thing that I'm working on. We also have work on healthcare.gov, helping people get insurance. And we also work with the VA on a project called vets.gov, whose goal is to help veterans get access to their benefits. So just to go through a little bit of what's sort of changing in the world of government contracting, I guess this Battle Days section is probably, from my perspective, this is the way I thought of things, and also the way that things are to some degree in government contracting in general. But so an RFP is a request for proposal. That's how you submit to try to get a contract. You think of those things, a long written response, written by lawyers, heavy on legalese and light on evidence of ability to deliver. Well, what we're doing today is we're including actual product development and proof of ability to execute on things, more so than text in these things. I worked on an application where we actually sent a team to one of the agencies, and they watched us and recorded us as we did work. And so their evaluation was based on how well we worked together, how could we get work done. And that's really exciting, I think. When I thought of government contracting, I thought of waterfall development with very long delivery cycles. That is a thing that happens. However, the contracts that we apply for we use agile development, and daily deploys are a common occurrence. You may also think about usability and design within government contracts as being afterthoughts. On the contracts that we apply for, the process is generally led by design and user research. So if you look at all the tools that I just mentioned, I think you'll find that they're very usable, sort of have like a modern web design appeal to them, maybe not the way that you think of a lot of government services that you've acted with on the web. So our philosophy as a company, we're trying to deliver high quality, usable government digital services. We use agile practices, we use modern tool sets, and then we're working with the best practices available for development workflows. And I'll talk a little bit more about the details of what those mean. On the tech side, our most common set of tools involves Rails on the back end, React on the side, and then some combination of Ansible, Terraform, and AWS for the DevOps work. We also have some extensive work in Go, in particular in healthcare.gov. We use Go on the API side. And then on the project that I work on, the backend is all in Node. So we have kind of a mix of tech. On these projects, we generally have to, we have tech that we think of as like our sort of tool set, but we do have to be flexible, because sometimes we come into a project where there's existing tech, and we need to use that or produce good reasons why we shouldn't. But in general, I think we wouldn't come onto a contract where we feel like the tech is very outdated, and not make moves around that. Deployments are all on AWS, and we actually have a lot of freedom in terms of the tools we use. So this is another predisposition that I had, that we would have to get every library we use checked or approved or whatever. This is not the case. On the projects that I've worked on, we just kind of we get to pick and choose what we use. There are some things, especially on the AWS side, where tools need to get approval, but I've found that process is not overly painful. In terms of workflow, I think of our process as something like Scrum Light. Personally, I'm more on the Agile as a set of good practices rather than a rigorous plan that one must adhere to every letter of. I think the company follows that philosophy in general. And I think of that as Agile with a lowercase a and not a capital A. So we have all the processes that I think you'd expect to find in an agile environment. We do planning meetings. We run 2-week sprints. We have stand-ups and all those sort of things. Similar to what I had always experienced in startups and other work outside of government. We're also remote first. This means that, as I showed you before, the whole company is spread across the country. The company was remote first from day one. On the technical side of how to solve like remote problems, I've been surprised at how simple the solutions are. We do a lot of video conferencing like this. We talk a lot on Slack. That's kind of the solution. When I worked jobs before where I was a remote person at a company that had an office, the solutions were more complicated because, of course, you have AV problems and those kinds of things under those circumstances. But with everybody remote, it's fairly simple. We also get together twice a year on what we call a retreat. We all meet up in some place and hang out and talk about the company and do work and have a good time. And you can read more about people's experiences with this on our blog, where occasionally people will write a post about what it's like to work remotely and what their life is like. Okay, so let's talk about recruiting for engineering positions. So we have a number of different projects. At any time, we have various slots open on those projects. That kind of comes and goes in a fluid way. So we hire for a number of different things, but generally what we look for is front-end development, back-end development, and DevOps folks. Those are pretty standard in software engineering. So I guess what those mean won't come as too much of a surprise. And you saw the tech that we generally use on that previous slide. And in general, what we look for is aptitude and attitude rather than knowledge of specific tech. So I would rather hire someone who is a sharp developer, who is excited to learn and is really good at their job, than someone who just knows Rails and is ready to slide right in on the project. So yeah, let me talk about the process then, and then we'll get into like what the homework stuff looks like. So the first thing you do is you apply for a position on our jobs page. This is linked to right off of our homepage with a list of all the currently available positions. Then we have our homework process. You complete the homework that's requested for that position. Once the homework phase is done and you've passed, you will have a few technical interviews, and then you get hired. So how this works depends on what our current projects are. So like what slots are available, like I said, is changing on a daily basis. We also sometimes bring people into sort of the hiring pipeline as like contingent hires because we have slots that we see as coming open. So there's lots of different options, and kind of we use the interview process generally as a screen to figure out what slots that people seem to be a good fit for. So what is the deal with this homework thing? So we ask engineering candidates to complete it. It's a few different exercises, and the idea is to demonstrate their skills. We are a remote company, so it is hard for us to sit down in front of a whiteboard and work out exercises together. And in any case, we view that as not a good practice for interviewing. And I'll explain why in a second. So these exercises we'll ask you to do they're short programming challenges. They're designed to be fun. I hope that you will find them to be. I did, but it is work. So it's not all fun and games. But the idea is to give it enough teeth so that you can really show us what you know. And then we evaluate those things and we grade them blindly by engineers across our entire team. Part of the expectation for engineers on the team is to grade a homework a day. So everybody's doing the grading, and we think that the blind grading is a very important criteria here. And I'll talk about why now. So let's see. So if we grade your homework blindly, it's going to remove bias from the process. There is inherent bias that comes into a process when you're sitting down with someone looking at them face to face. Do you like the person? Do you have your own internal prejudices or things like that? So we're trying to get all of those things out of the way when we're doing our technical evaluation of candidates. We also think that this process gives people the time they need to produce a quality answer. Personally, I know that for myself, sitting in front of someone with the clock ticking while they ask me to produce an answer to something bears no resemblance to what my actual work is like, and is a nerve-wracking experience that I don't think helps anybody all that much. So we like to give people time to do sort of an open book test to just show us what their best work is under circumstances that look like what they would do in their actual job. Another advantage is it creates a bigger sample size of work for us to evaluate. If we brought someone in for an interview, we would only have a little bit of time to sit with them and talk about things. This gives us, the person a lot of time to show us what they can really do. And another thing from our side that's cool is our engineers get a chance to participate in the recruiting process. So, at a company of our size, not everybody can interview every candidate, but this does give people a chance to have some say in the selection of what candidates, make it through our process. So what do we look for in the evaluations? We do have specific things that we look for. I can't tell you exactly what those are per exercise. But in general, the way we review is we look at the code as if it were a pull request. If I'm looking at it, would I want to merge this code in production? Would I want to work with someone who wrote this code? Like, do I think that that it shows like real good attention to detail, or is it kind of a mess? In general, we favor simplicity over complex solutions. So the problems that are described, just solve the one that's described. Don't build it as if you're trying to build it into like some enterprise system. Just solve the problem that's asked for. I think there can be a tendency to show off, and I definitely understand that in a job interview situation, but we just need to see you solve the problem. Another thing is making sure you follow the instructions. So if it asks you to output a thing, make sure you do. And then, I think it's the most important thing here is to show us that you know how to structure code and you know how to solve problems. To me, that's more important than getting the right answer. If someone submits a code that's a total mess but gets the right answer, that person will do more poorly than someone who submitted really thoughtful code, but maybe you didn't get every detail of the answer correct. Which is not to say that you shouldn't try to get the answer correct. So how does the process work? As I mentioned, first you apply for a position on our job page. Then you'll create an account in our homework submissions app. So we created an app. You log into it using the same email you used to apply. We have a README page that shows the homeworks that are expected that people should do based on the position that you're applying for. And so you complete them, you upload them to our submissions app. And then if you need help along the way, we have a public Slack channel. Our engineers are in there all the time and looking to provide help. One thing to note here is that this channel is for technical help around the homework exercises. So if you have a question like, how much am I going to get paid? Don't ask that in the Slack channel. We won't have an answer for you. That's a question for the recruiting team. So after you submit the homework, what to expect is we'll review it. We try to get to things in less than a week. Generally, it's shorter than that. Sometimes our pipeline really backs up, and we try to get to it as quickly as we can, but that it isn't always a day or two. And then the output of that will be one of three things. So you did a great job on the homework, and we'd like to move to interviews. We liked your homework and we'd like to see more. Or thanks for doing the homework, but we just don't see a fit right now. If that's the case, then you can wait 6 months and apply again. In the case of the first two, in general, we ask the number of homeworks that we look for each position varies, but it's, I think, at least 2. And our request is to kind of do them one at a time. So you'll find on the README about the homework exercises, where to start. But in general, you'll do one or two, and then we'll ask for one or two more, and then we would move to interviews after that process. This keeps us from having too many homeworks coming into the system, um, and it keeps you from having to do too much work if it doesn't seem like it's a good fit in any case. And then, so to talk about the process after the homework, so we'll do a series of interviews. This is usually two of them with members of the technical team. We feel that we've gotten the hard tech stuff out of the way through the homework process, so we will not ask you to solve crazy riddles. These interviews are more about like communication and fit and those kinds of things. Not everybody who can solve technical problems very well is a great fit for our teams. We need, there's the sort of soft skills, if you will, about communication and working with others and those kinds of things. And we want to be able to talk with folks. What I look for in these interviews is generally like sort of having a technical conversation. Like, can the person describe to me well the kinds of work that they've done and the kinds of problems that they've solved? And so, yeah, we're not going to ask you to solve any crazy riddles or weird technical problems on whiteboards during that process. And that is all I have.